Welcome everyone to my workshop on finance business partnering. Great to have you today. So, before we jump right in, I'm actually curious to learn a little bit about you. So, can you type in the chat what's your role and where you're from? Thank you. So I see there's a bit of a delay, so I'll read where you're from later. Let me not let you wait any longer. So just to get started, I wanted to share a brief story. So when I first started working in FP&A, about 13 years ago, I started at Procter& Gamble, a large multinational company, and I was excited to get started. But I learned that there are things that they don't teach at the university, right? I learned that there's things that you just had to learn on the job, like presenting numbers in front of people that know each number better than myself and can spot mistakes immediately, and also influencing and business partnering, right? So my boss had told me that part of my role is to challenge the my business partners. In this case, it was sales business partners, key account managers, and I tried to take that seriously, right? Because we did see in our data that forecasts tended to be on the optimistic side, right? We often didn't hit the numbers that we predicted. And so we had this monthly review meeting. It looks a bit like it is here on this image. 20 people around the room, senior leadership was there. I was presenting the numbers and I was challenging people, right? I tried to call them out when I thought that their projections are too optimistic. I would say things like, I don't think your conclusion makes any sense, here's why, right? And of course, I did it with data. I supported my analysis, my recommendations and my thoughts with financial analysis. And I tried to hold people accountable because I thought, that was my job. And after doing this for a number of weeks, one of the senior sales leader took me aside and said, look, I see what you're trying to do. I know it's coming from the right place, but it's hurting the relationships. And then he went on to share a framework with me that for the next years was super, super helpful for me to become a better business partner and manage those relationships better and influence from a different point of view. And I'll share that framework later on in the session. Before I go there, though, I want to just give a really quick introduction where I come from. And so my name is Christian. I have 12 years in FP&A experience in FP&A leadership roles. And it was always very important to me to have a strong business partnering aspect in those roles, right? So I worked closely with sales, HR, marketing, even factories, logistics. And I did that at large multinational consumer goods companies, Procter & Gamble, Unilever. And then after my MBA, I switched it to Squarespace, a tech company. And I stayed in tech ever since. Right now I'm at Data Rails, an FP&A software company. So that's just a little bit about me. Now, what I realized is learning FP&A is tough, right? Because it's not taught very well in universities. There's a lot that's being left out. And I also realized that I enjoy teaching and I enjoy coaching. So I went out to create a course. It's called FP&A Bootcamp. Essentially, I teach it live via Zoom because I love seeing when people's eyes light up when they get something that I'm teaching, right? I find that very rewarding. And we cover financial modeling, business partnering, of course, but also annual planning and financial storytelling. And today you'll get a sneak peek about business partnering. So you get a feel for, what is FP&A Bootcamp like, and hopefully learn something today about how to become a better finance business partner. But let's start with the fundamentals. So what would you say are the objectives of finance business partnering? Can you type it in the chat? Yeah, so we have some good responses there. Thank you very much. I'll read them all later. So the goal is you want to become a strategic partner, right? So the thing is, finance isn't a support function. Our job isn't just to produce fancy looking presentations for executives and board members. It's not just being the budget police and, cut budgets left and right. We want to be a strategic partner who helps drive sustainable growth and profitability while managing risks. And with managing risk, I don't mean just being the voice for conservatism, right? I know that, there are some accountants in the audience, and yes, it is important when you have your accounting hat on to be conservative, right? That's part of the role. But as a strategic partner, we need to do more. We also need to recommend the right risks, right? Of course, with doing our financial analysis, making sure everything ticks and ties, but then we should be willing to say, I know this is very risky, but it's the right risk to take for these reasons. And the thing is, in order to do this, though, we need to get a seat at the table where decisions are made. So let's talk a bit about what are the fundamentals, what is the foundation that needs to be there for your business partners to give you that seat at the table. Finance business partnering, essentially the foundation comes down to empathy and business acumen. With empathy, I don't mean that you should sympathize with people's feelings, right? What I mean with empathy is you need to be able to see the business from the position of your business partners. You need to understand their goals. You need to understand where they're coming from, and you need to understand their pain points, right? And what challenges they're facing. That's the empathy side. And you also need to understand the business holistically. So you need to understand the strategies, how those strategies translate into action plans, how we measure those action plans, and what good and bad performance actually looks like, right? Super, super important. Now let's drill a step deeper. So let's say what is at this intersection of empathy and business acumen? It's 4 things, and to me, those are the things that if you focus on those, you maximize your impact as a finance business partner. The first one is raising accountability. Then it's about simplifying and questioning, creating visibility, and influencing and empowering. And what I would like to do in the next few minutes is go deeper into each of those 4 aspects of finance business partnering. And then I'll be happy to share some best practices of what I learned works best to achieve them over the course of my career. So let's start with accountability. Accountability means we can point to what's causing an issue. And once we establish that, we can look for ways to address it, right? Without accountability, the company can't learn from its past. And tracking performance is meaningless in that case, right? That's important to keep in mind. So here are a few tips for raising accountability. First and foremost, and that's the absolute basic, you need to have comparators. Every metric that you're presenting, every metric you have on the slide needs to compare to something. So for example, you can compare to a prior forecast, to an operating plan, to previous periods, to the prior year. And I would go as far as to tell my team that if your metric doesn't have a comparator, don't even bother putting it on the slide. Because if people don't know whether performance is good or bad, there's not much point about talking about it, and it's definitely not helping with accountability. The next one is we need to get to the true root cause. And that can take work, right? It means that we aren't satisfied with superficial answers, for example, when it comes to variance analysis, right? Where we compare actual results to expected results. We need to dig deeper and get to a true root cause. So let me give you an example. Let's say we missed the profit target last month. Lower sales of product X, that's not a root cause, right? Even though it may be factually true. A root cause could be, for example, the new website converted fewer leads to paying customers than expected. What's the difference between the two statements? If you say lower sales of product X, there could be a number of actions, next steps you could take. It could be a million different things. But if you say the new website converted fewer leads to paying customers than expected, you can immediately make a recommendation about what to do, right? You can go through your website with a copywriter and look at all the different points where you have calls to action, for example, and do something about it. So the test, whether you've done enough digging, whether you asked enough why questions to your business partners, is does your insight suggest a clear action? If it doesn't suggest a clear action, or if there's a million things that could be done, you need to do more digging. You haven't found the root cause yet, okay? And the last one is don't escalate, right? Of course, if there's an issue, leadership attention results in action, right? And it usually results in fast action. But escalating harms your relationship. So if you can avoid that, that would be a big win. And a great way to avoid escalating is creating a governance process up front. What's a governance process? That's a regular cadence of review meetings. So the idea is, let's say you have a project or it's about the performance of your business, have a regular cadence of meetings, ideally, monthly or even weekly, where you always review the good and the bad. And you don't, and in those meetings, it's really about getting to the root cause. You don't hesitate mentioning who is responsible, right? But if you do that on a regular basis as part of this governance process, then senior leaders are always in the loop about things that are happening without you having to escalate anything. Because people then get used to this raised level of accountability and take it just as a regular part of doing business. So that's accountability. The next aspect of effective finance business partnering is simplifying and questioning. As finance leaders, we need to simplify because companies today are drowning in information. Executives don't have time to review 50 KPIs every day, right? And unless your company is very early stage, you'll have more information than anyone can reasonably process. So finance needs to decide what matters. And we do that by, of course, understanding the data and then asking questions. And a comment I sometimes get from more junior team members is, well, you tell me I should ask my business partners a lot of questions, but don't I just take away time from their day-to-day? Am I not just bothering them? And the thing is, if you ask the right questions, you're actually helping them because you encourage them to think outside the box, to look at the issues from a different angle, and to really take it a step further. And so I would break good questioning into 4 different categories. The first one is exploratory questions. A very powerful thing to ask is always, can you tell me more about that? Just encouraging people to think a little bit more about what else can they share about a challenge they're dealing with or a goal can be very helpful. Could you explain it further, right? That's the starting point. And then it's important and it's professional to challenge our business partners if we disagree or if we have data that points into a different direction, right? And one way to do that is you can say, hey, is this always the case? What's the reason to expect that your assumption holds true? Or a question I really like is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how certain are you about the estimate? it's really powerful to ask that on a scale of 0 to 10, because if it's a binary question, are you certain about that this will hold true? People just say yes, right? But if you ask for a scale and they say, well, it's probably about an 8, then you can ask, okay, what would you need to know for this to be a 10? What are you missing? And that gives you an access point to, go deeper. And as always, when challenging your business partners, it's essential you make sure they understand. You're asking these questions not to prove them wrong or to call them out, but to help them find the best possible solution. So it's important that they understand where you're coming from. And alternatives are also incredibly important. So because sometimes people just rush to the first idea that comes to mind, or sometimes people go with the idea from the highest paid person in the room, right? And so it's good to ask, okay, what is the counter argument? What could be a counter argument? Does anyone see this another way? What are other options that we could potentially do to achieve this result? Okay. And then finally, ask about implications to make sure that the consequences are understood. That's usually where you ask about, okay, worst case, tell me the worst case scenario. What would happen? Are there any broader impacts to the business? And also the best case scenario, right? Could we do more with this proposal that you're recommending? And how does this affect other projects, other parts of your business? Okay, that's simplifying and questioning. The third aspect is creating visibility. So that's, of course, a major responsibility of a finance business partner, because we are the team in the company that gets all the data, that has access to all the systems. And we need to use that to give our business partner a better idea of where the business is heading, right? And help them make better decisions that way. And how I like to approach this is, first, I go to my business partners and ask, hey, in an ideal world, which metrics would you like to see? What would you like to know about your business? And that's powerful because sometimes people think certain things are impossible, or they just come from a scarcity mindset where they think we are more limited than we really are. And by asking them to ignore all those limiting thoughts and those roadblocks, there will probably be things that we can't do, but it's likely that when they start listing the things they'd love to have, there's a number of items, a number of metrics we can start putting together for them. And then predictors. So I also always like to ask the question, what would you like to know in order to make decisions earlier? What are some early indicators that either there's trouble or that there's an opportunity to do more with your business? And those are called leading indicators, right? And that's usually those are the non-financial metrics. So as a successful finance business partner, we need to be willing to look at numbers that don't have a dollar sign attached to it, right? So there could be things like daily visitors of your blog, or daily visitors of your website, your online store, for example, just to name one. Or it could also be things like the number of calls to your consumer hotline, right? Which could maybe predict quality issues in the drop in revenue in the future. Okay. And the third one is, think about how often you meet with your finance business partners. What I often see is people meet right around at the beginning of the month, when you have actuals, you need to do your variance analysis, and then they don't talk to the business partners much until the next month and close rolls around. That's not ideal, because you're losing out on opportunity to have conversations about things that are still in flux, things that haven't been fully decided yet, or that haven't been fully rolled out yet. And that's, of course, a powerful area where finance can come with their unique point of view, their different viewpoint at the business because of the data we see. And so I would encourage you to experiment with weekly performance reviews, knowing that you won't have final numbers yet, knowing that you have less data than if you're in your bigger monthly reviews. But it can be a great opportunity to brainstorm ideas with the business and to show that you as a finance business partner wants to do more than just tracking budgets and tracking forecast accuracy. And finally, we need to influence our business partners, because the best presentation, the best financial analysis doesn't do much if people don't take action from it, right? And most of the time, we are working with leaders from departments outside of finance, so people over whom we don't have direct hierarchical authority. And so I listed here five common influencing styles, right? Let me introduce them briefly, and then I want to give you some concrete advice on what to do with that. So the first one, rationalizing, is about, do you use logic and facts and reasoning to present your ideas, right? Asserting is, do you rely on your personal confidence, rules, law, or authority to influence others? And do you challenge people when you don't agree with them? Negotiating means looking for compromises, looking for trade-offs so that we can come together and everyone can get a piece of it, and looking at larger interests that we have in common. Inspiring, when you're is a leadership style where you encourage others towards your position by communicating a sense of shared mission, for example, or an exciting possibility. You link it back to the vision of your company, and you try to inspire people through that, right? To march in the same direction as you are. And then finally, bridging means you attempt to influence outcomes by uniting or connecting with others. You may be relying on reciprocity, so the relationships you've built, the favors you've done people, and using your personal relationships to get people to agree with your position. So that's a brief introduction. What's key about this is that first you need to get an idea of what your preferred influencing style is. And a lot of this happens a little bit subconsciously. So the best way to do this is to create a journal for yourself where you write down for 1 week where your influencing attempts, right? What was the thing you wanted to influence, and how did you go about it? And then afterwards you can look back, and most of you will probably gravitate to one or maybe two of those influencing styles. That's completely normal. But what I would encourage you to try is try using all of them. So try to experiment, try to go with a style that you don't often use, because then what you'll realize is that some of them work better in certain situations and with certain people than others. And by experimenting with them and using different influencing styles, you'll probably be much more effective than if you're just using your one preferred influencing style. All right, so now let me get back to the situation I introduced at the beginning of this workshop. I'm in my first role out of undergrad, I was a finance business partner at Procter & Gamble, working with the sales team. And I like to challenge them. I like to call them out in this big meeting where all the leaders were there, because I thought that that's the best way, because there we talk about the financials, we have everyone together, and we can have a conversation about the numbers. And this sales leader talked to me one-to-one after a few weeks of doing this, and I had a lot of respect for him, because sales leaders, they are great at building relationships, right? That's what they do. And so he said, look, I see where you're coming from, makes sense. I see you're coming from the right place. But there's this framework called emotional bank accounts. And emotional bank accounts means that whenever we interact with people, most of the time we're either making a withdrawal or we're making a deposit, okay? And he told me that I've been making, and when he explained this to me, I realized that I made a lot of withdrawals, right? When I called people out in front of this big meeting and in front of this group of people, I made a withdrawal, which hurt the relationship a little bit. Other withdrawals are, for example, giving people a deadline that is very difficult to meet, telling people to do something on very short notice, right? Or even things like escalating, following up twice about something, or missing a deadline, right? Those are withdrawals. And what I realized is that probably I made more withdrawals than deposits, right, with my relationships. So deposits, some examples for deposits are asking people if there's anything you can do for them that's outside of your day-to-day, right? Doing them a favor, asking about their goals to understand how you can help them, optimizing, helping them with a process, where, for example, you know how to automate something in Excel, automating it for them. And I realized that I probably made way more withdrawals than deposits with those people. And as a result of that, many of my relationships were in a debit position, right? There were more withdrawals. And once I understood this, it was really eye-opening. And I started to think about ways, how can I make more deposits, right? How can I do something that helps them, not just me? And because the thing is, as a finance business partner, you can't get around making withdrawals sometimes, right? Sometimes you have to come with an urgent deadline and say, hey, I need this information from you by the end of day today. Can you put this together? Sometimes we have to cut budgets, right, and take money away from people. That's just normal course of business. But we can think about how can we lessen the impact of the withdrawal, right? Maybe give people a heads up before there's a difficult decision, like cutting budgets, so they can think about how they respond and how they manage it. Or give people bad news one-to-one instead of in front of a big group. And so this framework of emotional bank accounts essentially does two things. It helps you audit your professional relationships, right? It helps you see which ones need work and which ones are going well. And you can also use it as a tool to actively work on improving your most important relationships at work. Okay? So when I learned this, it was something that I actually kept going back to again and again over the years. And I found that was very helpful, especially as a finance business partner, where we do have to ask for a lot, right? For month-end close, for planning, for forecasting. We rely on people's information. And yeah, I would like to encourage you to think this through and see if you can apply it. It's a great tool. Yeah, and to wrap it up, you can put this, if you look at it at a higher level, there's this flywheel of effective business partnering. Today, we talked about how you can improve your relationships. If you do that, if you have more deposits than withdrawals, there will be more collaboration, right? People will be more likely to share information with you. And as finance professionals, you know that we rely on the right information at the right time. Otherwise, without that data, we can't have a big impact. But then once you have the data, you can show people that you can do more than just cutting budgets, doing forecast accuracy. Which then hopefully results in positive change, right? People see that you want to help them reach their goals, which then means they trust us more, which improves our relationships, which improves collaboration. And then this flywheel just keeps spinning faster and faster. And in my course, FP&A Bootcamp, we'll go much deeper into that. And there will be much more concrete advice about finance business partnering. And we also cover financial modeling, where I talk about the most commonly used financial models and how to match the right business case to the right financial model, and how to build a complex model in Excel so it's optimized for iteration. Because I firmly believe, anyone can build a complex model, but if it takes you 2 hours to answer a simple question, probably not there. In the planning workshop, we talk about how you set up the planning process end to end. So it's about more than just a P&L and a balance sheet on a piece of paper, right? And because I think if it's just about the numbers, it can be a waste of time, and 2 months later, the numbers are outdated. For me, annual planning is much more about getting the team to take a step back, evaluating strategies, and looking at, okay, how are we doing things differently in the next year? We'll talk about how to manage that process in FP&A Bootcamp. We also talk about different forecasting techniques. And we talk about financial storytelling, where we go deep into, okay, how do you get to the root cause and how do you present it? How do you visualize your information? When should you use which visualization type? And how do you present your presentation so it's more engaging and you have an impact because people run with it and make decisions off of it? The next course starts on November 8th. There's really no fluff or empty theory because I just focus on what I learned and what I know works. By the way, there will be much less me talking than today. You know, there will be a lot of breakout rooms and short engagements and guided brainstorming sessions and even role plays, because I firmly believe you need to practice what you learn. Of course, workshops will be recorded. There will be summaries and templates. By the way, you can get the summary, the handout for today's session if you go to fpaprep.com/partnering. And I've taught FP&A Bootcamp for over a year now, and you know, I had 164 happy students, and so I'm confident that it will be a good fit for you as well if you want to improve your FP&A skills. So I offer a participation money back guarantee. That means if you attend the workshop, you do the exercises, and you're still not getting what you hoped for, then I give you your full payment back, no questions asked. Okay? So the next course starts on Tuesday. Applications wrap up on Monday. And yeah, you can apply now at fpaprep.com/course. The link is on the slide here. And yeah, I would love to work with you next week. Thank you so much for joining this live session. Have a great day.